Hello, everybody. It's Keith Roding from PackerReport.com and Brian Groff from the second floor of his home. And we're getting ready for the Packers game, a Thursday night game against the Seattle Seahawks. And so glad you could join us this evening. Let's get ready for that game. We'll take a look back at that Dolphins win. We'll take a look ahead at the Seattle win and then focus in on a little bit of the history between these two teams. I know there's a lot that kind of goes back a ways. Especially in the playoffs with we'll take the ball and score, and there's all that as far as in the connections with these two teams. But we'll talk specifically about that January 2015 meeting. But Keith, first off, how you doing as we get ready?
Good, Brian. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. The days just fly by, and they just played on Sunday, and then it's just a quick turnaround. The players have already been in Seattle, and 4 of those guys didn't make the trip. So who did we have that didn't make the trip? Kevin King, Nick Perry, Randall Cobb, Kentrell Bryce. What kind of updates do you have for us as far as who's not going to be available tomorrow?
I mean, I think beyond the 4 you mentioned, Lucas Patrick had the concussion that he got making his debut as the Packers' newest kick returner, and that was fun to watch until the collision. And I think he might have blacked out on that play, so I'd be surprised if he played. I think the other guys we look at that were limited participants, from David Bakhtiari to Jimmy Graham, I think those guys we expect to play. So it was a pretty lengthy injury report. Really, the only guy of any note that was out on Seattle's side was KJ Wright. Now, KJ Wright's a heck of a linebacker, so him being out, especially when they're a team that struggles to stop the run, and with the success that the Packers have had with Aaron Jones, I think that can really play to Green Bay's favor.
Is that really one of the big takeaways? I think we would pretty much all agree was the Aaron Jones breakout game. We were waiting for it. We kept talking about it week after week, and fortunately, Mike McCarthy heard everybody who had been tweeting about it and writing about it and talking about it. So, was he listening?
I don't know if he was listening, but I think he was believing what he saw, which was when you give Aaron Jones the ball, magical things can happen. I think for a lot of Packer fans, for a lot of media, this looks like Ahman Green-esque type of running. We haven't seen this type of a dynamic playmaker and a home run threat out of the backfield in a very long time. So here's a young guy. He was splitting carries. He was part of that 3-headed backfield with Ty Montgomery and Jamal Williams. Became a 2-headed backfield once they got rid of Montgomery, obviously. But when you look at what Aaron Jones has done, Brian, 6.77 yards a carry. So 2/3 of a first down every time he touches the ball. So it's been pretty amazing. I wrote down here, so far this year, he's had 73 carries for 494 yards. Coincidentally, Jamal Williams, same number of carries, 73 carries, 270 yards. So we're talking about a difference of 224 yards, and that shows you the type of playmaker he is. It's funny, he's not the fastest guy on the team. I was talking to Davante Adams after the game. He said he looked over and he's like, he's not the fastest guy in this locker room. He's like, but when he gets that ball, he just explodes, and he's so fast and he's got such great vision that there's not a lot of stopping and starting and getting up to speed. He hits and he sees it, and he's veering more than he's stopping and cutting, and that's allowing him to keep his speed up. And we saw that 67-yard run. That's the longest run since Randall Cobb ripped one off in 2013. So the Dolphins' Xavier Howard, who really might have been one of the fastest guys on the field that day, turned around and was able to knock him out a couple yards shy of the end zone. But man, oh man, just when you watch him, it's fun to watch. You feel really good about what he can do, and I think they've got a guy they can hang their hat on the rest of the way out.
And that was a real positive from the offensive standpoint. How about on the other side of the ball? I know the Packers, as far as NFL rankings, are moving up this week because some of the outside observers are saying we really like what they did last week, and a lot of it was contributed to the defense. Even this Miami team with a backup quarterback had been putting up points, but the defense was able to keep them in check.
Yeah, and I think 31-12, that's the score that it should be. I mean, you're going up against a team with a backup quarterback, to your point, Brian. They had put up a lot of points, but this is also a Miami team that their offensive line on opening day, they had 4 different starters in there when they took on the Packers. So you've got 4 backups in on your offensive line. You've got a backup quarterback in. Frank Gore certainly looked ageless, especially in that first half, ripping off some big gains and stacking up, 80 some yards in the first half. But, midway through the third quarter, it was still 14-12. That was really kind of anybody's game. Defensively, there were a lot of missed tackles. But I think defensively, too, we saw 6 different guys get a sack that game. Green Bay, some way, somehow, and I didn't even believe the stat when I saw it, 31 sacks this year. They lead the league in sacks, and it seems stunning. And especially when you look at who has those sacks and who doesn't. I think that's maybe the biggest surprise.
And they've played one less game than a lot of the other teams that are up there at the top of that list.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's still teams coming up on their bye.
Is the number correct that it's 15 different players who have a sack?
Let me take a look at my notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, they traded HaHa. That's a. I've got 9 guys on a list right here. HaHa makes 10, so 15 sounds like a lot, but maybe they've blitzed guys. It's funny. They're blitzing a little bit less than what Dom Capers did. I think I saw it was somewhere around 26%. Capers was maybe as high as 32, 33 last year, but they're bringing guys from different areas. So you look at the guys that have sacks. Kenny Clark, Pro Bowl year. We've been talking about him every week. I mean, for me, everything that's happening that's good defensively is starting with Kenny Clark. 5 sacks. He's tied for the team lead. The guy he's tied with, good old Kyler Fackrell, who got 3 sacks in that Buffalo game. But I'll tell you what, he got another one Sunday. He's got 5 on the year. He's pretty active. He's getting on the field a lot more with, injuries to Perry and just as part of the rotation. And he's getting pressure on the quarterback even when he's not getting the sacks. So between those 2 guys that, you wouldn't expect to be leading your team in sacks, they've got 10 right there. So, you go down the list, Blake Martinez, an inside linebacker, not a guy you expect to blitz. He's got 4 sacks. Reggie Gilbert, 2.5. But I think the big surprise is that you add up Nick Perry and Clay Matthews, and you add up their $11 million salary hit and their $10 million salary hit, and they've got 4 sacks. So kind of crazy to think if those guys were actually doing what you were paying them to do, where they might be with getting pressure on the quarterback.
When you were adding up those who have a sack, were you including Raven Green, who not only has a sack, almost had an interception, had a nice run on a fake punt?
I know. I haven't. I mean, he's their new Swiss Army knife, apparently.
Raven Green, one of these guys comes out of James Madison. Isn't he kind of in a long line of safeties that have kind of sort of come out of nowhere and have been able to find a little bit of the limelight in that Packers secondary?
I think so. I mean, we've seen the Packers pull some really quality guys out of weird places. You go back to Nick Collins. I remember when Nick Collins was drafted out of Bethune-Cookman, which I recall on draft weekend, I kept referring to it as Betty Crocker College. So it just, you get guys out of these weird spots. It's not defensive back you. This isn't LSU. This isn't Alabama. So to take a guy like that really out of nowhere, a guy that maybe was only known for having a cool name, you throw him in a spot because, my God, who else are you going to put at safety? And, look at what the guy's able to do.
When you think of his cool name, does it remind you of anyone else who had a similar name that you would call cool that used to play for the Packers?
I mean, it reminds me of Tiger Green.
Tiger Green,
son, is it?
Hey, I got an idea. Let's do some Tiger Green trivia.
Oh my God, bring it!
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. We'll go real quickly because I know you can just rattle these off. 1, 2, 3. What position did Tiger Green play?
Defensive back.
He was a safety. What 2 teams did he play for in the NFL?
Packers.
Yes.
Redskins.
The Falcons.
Oh.
He played for the Falcons in '85. He played for the Packers from '86 through '90.
I know his jersey number.
What was his jersey number?
23.
23 sounds right. He had a different number, I think, when he was with Atlanta. So he played 72 games with the Packers. How many interceptions did he have?
Oh my gosh. Where is this go? Where is this coming from? I was not. Was this
off the top of my head?
Oh my gosh. 17.
He had 6 interceptions. How many sacks? I'll give you a hint. He would tie if he was playing this year, Clay Matthews and Nick Berry.
Oh my gosh. 2.5.
4.
Oh, well, you didn't say added together.
4.
What's bad at math? I was not told there would be any math involved.
I got more trivia for you. I just wanted to go. I figured you would know. Yeah. What's his real name?
I got to tell you, I'm always on the lookout when I go to home games. You know, as I'm walking towards the entrance, you know, through the parking lot. I always like to look around and just kind of see like who's got the best jersey game going on. You know, who's got the Jurkovec jersey, or you know what's that obscure jersey I'm going to see. It was probably 3 or 4 seasons ago. I see a guy cut in front of me. He's in a tiger green jersey. I stopped him to compliment him. I said, that is maybe the only tiger green jersey I've seen in 25 years of covering the team. So he got
sure it wasn't.
What's that?
Are you sure it wasn't tiger green?
It might have been.
What was Tiger Green's real name?
Wow. You know, I should know this. Give me a hint. What does it start with?
A G.
Gary.
George Everett Green. So what's he doing now? He actually, I thought this is where you were going with the story. So this is where it all kind of comes together. He was just at a Packers game last year, maybe, or the year before. He was one of the alumni that was up in the suite level. What's he doing right now for his job?
Wow. Financial planning?
He's a police officer in Metro Atlanta.
Is he really?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he played at Western Carolina. Yeah.
I'm a little dusty. I'm a little dusty on my Tiger Green trivia. Let's jersey number should.
Let's talk about something that was a little more recent and kind of our connected past, when we were doing a show where we were live in front of an audience that we could actually see. Yes. And we thought we would cover the Packers in a Super Bowl, but instead they had a lead that they couldn't finish off when they went to Seattle in January of 2015. So that's the last time the Packers played in Seattle. It's been a few years.
It has. I'm not. I mean, you've made me very sad with this topic, Brian.
You went how long without sleeping and shaving and eating?
I mean, it was
a period of time for you, as I recall.
As a reporter, we try to be objective, but I'll tell you what, as a reporter, there's also, if you cover a football team, there's much like for players, the ultimate goal is playing in the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Man, if you cover an NFL team, you want to go and cover a Super Bowl, and I've been very fortunate to do it 3 times, but I waited and I waited and I waited, and I'm checking ticket prices on my laptop, and I'm watching this game, and I'm a little bit superstitious, and I'm not booking a ticket. And as it gets later in the game, I start seeing the ticket prices from, anywhere in the state, Appleton, Green Bay, Wausau, wherever, start going up. And I'm like, fine, I'm going to book it. It's 19-7. There's, 3.5, 4 minutes left in the game. Fine. And I booked the tickets, and everything just went to hell from there. It was just.
I got to let you know, you covered 3 Super Bowls. I missed out on ever going. The one year I didn't do a Packers show, they went to the Super Bowl and won it. I was the biggest jinx. Ted Thompson used to call me and tell me, just stay away.
I didn't know it was you.
Oh, it was me. It was me big time.
That Seattle game was awful, though. And when we had our show, I remember getting, we can go through all the turnover. Everybody wants to talk about the Bostic play. People cannot talk enough about Bostic costing them the game. There were a lot of things from the fake punt to the 2-point conversion that Russell Wilson rolls right and throws all the way across his body, and you get this long floater that's caught with, Clinton Dix is the closest guy. But for me, and you know this is coming, the play that burned me was the Morgan Burnett interception when he's running down the field and he's got nothing. Yes, he's got nothing but green. And Julius Peppers, who sealed his fate to never, ever win a championship with what followed, waved him down. Oh, the field's wet. Don't fumble it. Don't lose the ball. We're coached it. So Bill Ferrario, who did the show with you and I, he and I argued and argued and argued because he said, you need to do what you're coached to do, and that's go to the ground in that situation. And I said, you go to the end zone. You run and you don't stop till you either score a touchdown or you get tackled, and that would have put him in field goal range. And there we have it. Not that I'm bitter.
So like I said before, good to hear that you're right. You mentioned Brandon Bostic. PackersNews.com had a good article catching up with him and what he went through following that play, what it was like when all of a sudden it seemed the whole world turned against him. He was getting physical threats. He was getting death threats. He went in for his exit interview for end of season, I should say. He asked McCarthy if he was the reason why they lost the game. McCarthy said no. He asked if he would be back. He said yes. And then 3 weeks later, he was released. He spent some time with a couple more teams. Never really played meaningful football again after that. He felt for Ty Montgomery a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, for sure.
And he reached out to him, and all of a sudden threats came back. But, it was a big thing for Brandon Bostic. Ernest Biner reached out to him, if you remember the fumble.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
The AFC title game.
Drive.
Yeah, so that's something that he had to live with, and he reached out to Brandon Bostic, and he said, you got to go back and you watch the play and you learn from the play. So there's been some positives that he's taken from that. Bostic actually was at a game at Lambeau Field last year. Not a single person, he said, recognized him.
Wow. And it's one thing for fans to point to, a Brett Favre interception and blame the 2000 NFC title game, loss on that. I mean, he can take it. He's made enough plays. You take a guy like a Brandon Bostic, a guy really with, just a fairly undistinguishable career, and you put him in a spot like that. And it's terrible how that can haunt him. And again, I think is certainly, as we've seen with the Ty Montgomery situation, there's a lot of people that are calling themselves fans out there that are really just exhibiting some pretty shameful behavior. So, kudos to the NFL community for reaching out to him and for reaching out to Ty Montgomery as well. I think that's comforting. And certainly there were a lot of fans that were also very vocal, for Bostic, for Montgomery, and so on, saying, hey, it's not your fault. It's never one play. I think everybody wants to point to that one defining play at the end when the game is seemingly on the line. But there's so much that goes into it. And we talk about that Seattle game and the NFC title game. I mean, for me, it really wasn't the Bostic play because it never, ever, ever should have got to that. There were so many other opportunities where that game should have been won and over.
And it does go, and he talked about it in that article too. He knows what he was coached, and you mentioned this with Bill. You're coached to do a certain thing over and over again, and all of a sudden he sees that ball, and all of a sudden I'm a tight end. That instinct took over, and it was I want to go up and get that ball. So he said that's kind of what happened in that moment.
He's a guy getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to catch a football. So
until he's told not to.
Yeah. I mean,
it was part of his role though too, because he obviously was playing special teams, and that was a situation that was called for. You mentioned Clinton Dix, and as I understand, you had a little interaction with your buddy Bill Huber and Brian Gutekunst recently.
Yeah. So my son Cole just entered the room, and his only Packer jersey right now is a Clinton Dix jersey. So Cole is not taking this well. Are you over this yet, Cole? No, thumbs down. So Cole is 12. Bill Huber, he's got two boys as well. My son's and they're younger. They're younger than Hayden and Cole, my son. So Bill's youngest son, Isaac, is a huge Clinton Dix fan. And when Bill went home and told his son that Clinton Dix had been traded, he got the quivering lip and in tears and disbelief in the whole thing. So before the Miami game, Bill and I are sitting down having our pregame meal in the press box behind the seating area, and Brian Gutekunst is walking through. So Bill flags him down, and he says, "Hey, Brian," he said, I've been meaning to tell you, when you traded he said it was pretty tough to break it to my son. He's like, started crying. He took it really hard. He wasn't happy about it. And Gutekunst actually, he apologized to Bill. He said, tell your son I'm sorry. That's how those things go. But then he shared a story with us. He said a couple of weeks before the trade deadline, somebody had come into his office to remind him that there was some charity auction coming up somewhere in town, and they needed a bunch of items for this. So Gutekunst pointed to a bag that was sitting in his office, and he said, "Okay, it's all in this bag over here." So they took the bag out of his office. A few days after the trading deadline, Gutekunst is at this charity event with his wife, and as they start going through the things to auction it off, they pull out an autographed Clinton Dix helmet as Gutekunst is sitting there. So a little bit of an awkward situation for him there as well. But again, the NFL is a business, so that's how it goes.
It's kind of like when a bobblehead game is all set up and the player taken away. I figured we could veer back toward the Seahawks by having our friend Neil Gavinsky offer up a question. I don't know if you can read that in a full paragraph there. How come there hasn't been a chewing gum company approach Pete Carroll for endorsing their product? And if he did, should he be fired?
My son just said that's a legit question. I don't know. That's pretty funny. I think he could do well for a chewing gum company, but
as we've discussed, Packers and Seahawks last time they played, that was with a Super Bowl on the line. Not necessarily that point, but it feels like the season could be make or break at this point for both the Packers and Seattle. How do you see the Packers building off of the success that they had last Sunday? Can you see them keeping it rolling? And what happens if they don't win here? You just say that this season's done and it's time to pack it in and look ahead to next year? This puts them definitely right up in the playoff picture if they get a win.
It does. Well, so you've got Green Bay 4-1 and really trailing Chicago for the division lead. So you're thinking about wild card at this point. You've got Seattle that's 4-5. They've lost a few games in a row. The Rams are in their division at 9-1. So there's really no realistic way they're winning their division. So we've got two teams going for an NFC wildcard spot. So there's some interesting numbers, I think, at play for this game. For one, home teams are 8-2 on Thursday night games. So with that, I think that you would think that works in their favor. You can wonder, are they a little bit emotionally exhausted after what happened with them and the Rams? I mean, certainly the Packers can relate to, having a close loss against what I think is, probably along with the Chiefs, one of the two best teams in the NFL. But there's some things that the Packers are finally doing right now that play into what Seattle is struggling with. So we talked about Aaron Jones earlier, averaging 6.77 yards every single time he touches the ball. As a team, Green Bay's averaging almost 5.2 yards a carry, really because of him, obviously, is kind of becoming as close to a bell cow back as they've had. Seattle is 29th against the run. So this is something. This is not the defense that a lot of Packer fans have remembered and seen over the years. This isn't a defense that, helped carry them to the Super Bowl. There are no members of the Legion of Boom around anymore, as hard as that is to believe. They still have Bobby Wagner, which really, I mean, he's made the Pro Bowl and All-Pro. I don't know if you can call him underrated, but he doesn't seem like he's a guy that's talked about a lot. And really, for anybody that, has the opportunity to watch, it's a treat to watch him. I mean, he's a phenomenal middle linebacker. So that said, KJ Wright, a very good linebacker in his own right, that's next to him is the one key guy that's out for Seattle. So they're struggling to stop the run already. You've got Green Bay coming in red hot against the run. And then we talked about sacks for the Packers too. Seattle is, I think, giving up they're last in the league in sack percentage at 11.4%. So you've got a team that's given up a lot of sacks and not stopping the run, meaning a Packer team that's running the ball better than anybody and getting to the quarterback better than anybody. So if this was a game that maybe initially you felt like wasn't really going to go in the Packers' favor, I'll tell you what, I kind of felt that way too. And the more I looked through the numbers and the more I thought about some of those matchups, this is a game they definitely have a very good shot of winning. And it's one, again, I don't know if the season's on the line, but it might be.
And Seattle not being able to run the football, the Packers being able to stop the run. Seattle has also struggled with some third and long situations, so that's another chance where the Packers can extend that lead that they have across the league for their sack total.
Yeah, Seattle's got Chris Carson, and he's had some injury issues of late. When he's been in there, he's played well. I've probably paid a little special attention to him because he happens to be on my fantasy football team, but when he's been out, they've had Mike Davis that they can put in as kind of a change of pace back. They've got Rashad Penny, the rookie, who really early on was a healthy scratch and just played himself out of opportunities. So they've kind of got him in the mix now again as well. Carson is really the lead guy, but again, Carson is really much more of a workman-like back. I mean, he's a guy, he'll come in and he'll pound it, and he'll end up with 110, 115 yards, something like that. So again, I think Green Bay has done okay stopping the run. We talked about missed tackles earlier. They really struggled in the first half of that Miami game with Frank Gore. So, we'll see how they start off. I think, especially going to CenturyLink where it's so loud, you don't want to let Seattle start running the ball and let that crowd start getting into it. I think they want to shut them down the first few drives, and they want to be able to come out with Aaron Jones, and they want to be able to be the ones to set the tone and do the pounding. I think if you do that, we didn't even talk about Devontae Adams. He's got 9 touchdowns. He's tied for second in the league in receiving touchdowns. He's first in the league in red zone touchdowns. So, and the only reason his 9th touchdown wasn't a red zone touchdown was because he got the penalty for that crackback block that backed him up. So he's a guy, we're talking about numbers. I think it's every 6.8 catches is a touchdown for him. So that's pretty incredible. This is a guy, I wrote about him after the game for PackerReport.com, just has a nose for the end zone. He talked about that. He talked about all the touchdowns he scored in college. In college, it was just over 6 catches. So, I mean, nobody's getting part of a catch, but it was, an even smaller rate per catch that he was getting in the end zone. So he's a guy that nobody's really talking about. I wouldn't say anybody is at this point in the season lumping him in with the elite receivers in the league when they talk about him. But I think when you look at his receptions and when you look at what he's meant to the team, he's another guy. Aaron Rodgers talked about feeding him. So you've got Jones, you feed Adams, and again, you don't have a Richard Sherman matching up on him. You don't have to worry about an Earl Thomas. You don't have to worry about a Cam Chancellor lowering the boom on somebody on an underneath route. So when you start looking at matchups and the numbers, I think you can feel pretty good about them Thursday night.
Looks promising. We shall see tomorrow night. Before we go, Keith, Le'Veon Bell didn't report to the Steelers, so he's not going to play this year, and his teammates just started grabbing all his stuff. If you were in that locker room, what would be the one thing you would want to take of Le'Veon Bell's?
Le'Veon Bell was the keeper in my fantasy league, so I am not happy at all with him. And I got scooped on James Conner, who I've consistently called John Connor all year, and my sons continue to never get the Terminator reference. What would I take of Le'Veon Bell? My gosh, I wouldn't take anything. You talk. My son just said to take his cleats. But I'll tell you what. I don't understand who he's getting business advice from. I don't understand forfeiting $14.5 million just to say you don't have wear and tear on your body for a year and you're going to get that big contract. I think, if anything, he's demonstrated himself as a guy that cares more about himself than the team, that's going to be a problem with upper management. And while he sat out, I think every other team in the league that might be thinking about wanting to sign him, as good as he is, got an up-close example of what happens when you draft a guy for far less money, put him in the right system behind a good offensive line. And you remember one of the things that ticked Bell off early in the season was a couple of his linemen spoke up and said, hey, you think you're doing this by yourself? You're not. What about us? So, they might have been on to something with the success Connor's having, but, I don't like the way he went about this at all. Again, the NFL's a business, to each his own, but man, oh man, I don't
Well, if it's truly, you'll take the cleat, put them up on eBay and sell it, and then you can retire on whatever it is you make.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching us. We look forward to seeing the Packers take on the Seattle Seahawks on Thursday Night Football. Have a good night, everyone.